Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us and our panelists for our next quarterly first responder meeting. This is the last one of 2021, so I'm happy to see you all before the holidays and before we start 2022. We are welcoming a panel from the Adult Protective Services in our, actually we just have Portage, Summit, and Wayne on today. Stark was unable to make it. They may be able to jump on while we're into the meeting, but we'll see how it goes. I have their information, so I can share that with you anyways. And I will pretty much turn it over to them, and then we'll open it up at the end if anyone has any additional comments or questions. Just to get us started, we are again welcoming the panelists from Portage, Summit, and Wayne for right now. We have Nicholas Gribble here from Portage. Susan may be able to jump on at some point from Stark. We have Amy and Kathy here from Summit and Jordan from Wayne. So just to start out, we're just kind of gonna round robin it for those three counties for now. Just overviewing the Adult Protective Services for the county, just when it's time to call, what the process looks like, reporting information, what information is needed to make a report, anything like that. Some of the information and processes might look similar in all of our counties, but if there's any individualities or differences between them, please feel free to highlight those. And then we will have contact information up on the screen at the end. I'll start off. Stark sent me their information, so I can just read that off. So for Stark County, all calls are screened by the Stark County Job and Family Services report line staff, according to screening guidelines developed by the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. And then from there, all investigations are conducted by APS staff from Coleman Professional Services. And then reports are only received after being reviewed and screened by Stark County JFS staff, and not all reports are received by Coleman. So from there, I'll turn it over to, let's go with Summit first. If you want to take over, Amy and Kathy, and introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, Amy Cooper, Summit County Adult Protective Services. So for Summit County, you would call us whenever you have a concern. We have a 24-hour hotline. As Courtney said, we did give you guys our 24-hour number. There's also a statewide number that you can call, and it will direct you back to the county. And there's an online portal. All of our referrals, regardless of the way that they come in, will be reviewed by management and either screened in or screened out, and then investigated by our workers. As far as what information we need, the more information we can get, obviously, the better. But at the very least, the demographic information, a client's address, a phone number, we need at least a starting off point so that we know where to begin. So I would say that's probably our most important. We definitely also need their age. Over 60 is, the clients that we reach. So.
Okay, thank you. And then I don't know, Kathy, if you wanted to introduce yourself right here at the beginning.
Sure, I'm Kathy Rufner. I'm the Deputy Director here at Summit County over our Adult Protective Services and our long-term care unit. And like Amy said, seniors 60 and over, if you ever have questions or in doubt, we'd rather that you call us, run it by us, and then make a decision. Any little piece of information you have, we may be able to add that to other calls that maybe we had and screened out. And so think of it like a big puzzle. You might have a little piece here, somebody else might have a piece. Law enforcement may have called us, a neighbor may have called us. And so sometimes it may be a little piece of information that you think you have, but when we add it to that big picture, it's sometimes then enough for us to screen things in. The state came out with some screening guidelines a few years ago. And so we kind of base some of our decisions of what we screen in and out based on that criteria. And so, the very first thing is, are they 60 or not? If they're not the age of 60, we cannot screen that in by law. As long as they're over 60, there's an allegation of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. those are the kind of investigations that we're going to go out and do. The other thing too is getting back to that piece of the puzzle is somebody else, we may already have an open investigation. And so that little bit of information you have may be something that we need to either push the case to the level of needing court intervention or being able to get an order. Sometimes it's just that little bit of extra information, or even knowing that you're involved, or that there could be other support people that maybe you're aware of. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. And then we do have a question in the chat. Who do we call if they are under the age of 60?
I'm going to say, for us, I guess it depends. It depends on what the need or what the allegation is. We have several different community services and resources available here in Summit County. Sometimes calling 211 is a great resource because they're familiar with everything. And I guess it depends too if they're eligible for waiver services. Waiver services are determined by Medicaid eligibility. And so I hate to not be able to give a definite answer, but at least for here in Summit, I would say 211, or depends on the nature of the allegation. And sometimes if it's like an exploitation type thing, those are definitely things that you could call your local law enforcement about.
All right, thank you. And if anyone has any other questions throughout, feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll address them as we go. So from here, let's jump over to Portage.
Hi, I'm Nick Gribble. I'm with Portage County Job and Family Services. We are a combined agency with our Children's Services. In fact, that's where I started my career, is with Children's Services, and still supervise folks in that format. We have a very small APS unit here. It's myself and one investigator. Reports anytime you have a reasonable suspicion of abuse, neglect, exploitation, or even self-neglect, we would say to call the report in. And we have a 24-hour mandate hotline that is in conjunction with our child welfare hotline. Once received, my screeners can screen those reports based on the guidelines, and then also consult myself or other supervisor if they're on the fence on if it meets the criteria to open a case. Again, basic information we're looking for is kind of very similar to everybody else. Addresses, name, age, and also what medical conditions the adult may have. Really, the state defines an at-risk adult as not only just being over 60, but being affected by the affirmative of aging somehow, which could be some mental capacity concerns, but also physical capacity. So anything that may limit their ability to care or protect for themselves is important for us to know, because it could determine whether we screen a case in or out. And then also the concerns that you have for that individual would be important as well.
All right, thank you. Do you have anything for people under the age of 60?
That's a hard one. There's really, there's a big gap between 18 and 60, right, in the state of Ohio. And there's really not a whole lot of places. We will do our best, again, to reiterate what Kathy said, to kind of hear the concern. If it comes to the hotline, hear the concerns, what they are, and try to guide you in that direction. I will say, if the adult is under 60 and qualifies for developmental disability services, we would, guide you to reporting it as a major unusual incident to their office, and at least have it looked into by one of their investigators. But otherwise, yeah, we would direct you to try to help you direct you to the proper services then.
All right, thank you. And then Wayne County, if you want to take it over.
Hi, I'm Jordan Krajic. I am the only investigator for Wayne County. I do the screening, I do the ongoing, I do the investigation, I do guardianships if I need to. So there's only just me. So there's a lot to take on. There's a lot of when to call, what the process, it's all the same from everybody else's. We screen in every call though. So unless we were out there within the past month, we screen in everything, regardless of, severity or the amount of information provided. If there's a question, we go out. So that's what's different about our county.
All right, and then same thing, do you know of anything available for those under the age of 60?
Piggybacking off Nicholas, that, we do suggest developmental disabilities, like a referral to them if necessary, or we just try to listen to their, what they need and refer out to different agencies that could provide more assistance for that person. So I usually listen to what the concerns are, even if they're under the age of 60, so I can refer them to a community agency.
All right, thank you. I'll put you on the hot spot again. And for our next question, can you explain the different types and warning signs of elder abuse and exploitation for us, please?
So that is a very broad question. I was looking at that and I'm like, how do I answer that without, just listing off a million different things? So I just kind of narrowed it down to, the signs of abuse. It could be anything from, physical marks, black eyes, welts, cuts, punctures, things like that. There's also, the untreated injuries, different stages of healing. So it's ongoing abuse. If they're scabbing, if the bruises change to different color, that type of thing. A change in behavior. So if they're, demonstrating memory loss, or they start acting different, like belligerent or violent, there are concerns about that. Withdrawn, which has been a very popular one due to the pandemic, is, social isolation, lack of support from family. Also, which is kind of a thing that we deal with, is the caregiver refuses for people to go into the home and meet with the client. So that's another sign of abuse. On moving on more towards neglect. So in general, as neglect, it would be like the living conditions, hoarding, they're unsafe. I hear this a lot, deplorable, lack of heat, utilities, trying to think, appliances, lack of, access to food, things like that, which would more fall under self-neglect, lack of food or resources, not reaching out or taking medications, things like that. There's also, if they're, malnourished, that's self-neglect. If they're not eating, it could possibly caregiver neglect, dependent upon the situation. Untreated or unattended health problems, that includes mental health, which has also been something very popular. The next section, it would be the signs of exploitation. So it would be more of family members. So the basic would be like family members, if they're using their food stamp card, their debit card, or there's, unapproved transactions in the account, like to, Amazon or Facebook. I don't know, Facebook Pay is a thing that I had with a case. So forgery of a signature, or, the lack of access to their funds, or that could include possessions as well, not just money. That's about sums it up for something super broad, and it all depends on, the county dynamics and different things, but that's basically what I do encounter a lot with self-neglect. The bugs and hoarding. So that's like I could say it's a majority of my calls are they have bed bugs or roaches, and the home is falling apart and there's hoarding. So that's a big self-neglect thing that we've been encountering.
Okay, there's a question in the chat that's kind of branching off of that I'm gonna jump to first. So what are examples of cases that you would screen out? And anyone can go ahead and jump in for.
If we've exhausted all of our, so I said we screen in everything, but if we've exhausted all of the resources, all of the referrals, and we've been involved within the last month or two, then we would screen out a case.
Just to give you an idea in volume, in Summit County, we receive over 2,000 phone calls a year to our hotline. And so we currently have 10 investigators that go out and do our investigations, and we probably screen in around 1,200 cases a year. And so give or take. But so let's say, for example, somebody calls us and says the person has no food. Well, but they get home delivered meals and their son brings them over a meal and they go to McDonald's and they meet some friends. Well, they may not necessarily have a whole lot of food in the house, but they have food and they have the means to get food. So it's technically they have food and they have the means to get it. So that's not necessarily something we would screen in. And like I mentioned earlier, there are the guidelines that the state gave us, those are guidelines, and each county operates differently. There's 88 counties, and they're trying to be a little more consistent throughout the state on how we screen and do things. Back at the end of 2017, they created a state database called ODAPS, and that's the Ohio Database for Adult Protective Services. And so basically, if you're familiar with Children's Services, they came out with SACWIS back in like 2006 or 2008. And so basically, ODAPS is a statewide system that connects all 88 counties together with the information from 2017 moving forward. So if Mrs. Smith had an intervention with, or something happened, and she was living down in Franklin County, and she moved to Portage County would be able to look and see whatever the allegations were, who the alleged perpetrator was, what services were offered, if any, if there's any kind of intervention done in Franklin. And so we'd be able to look at that and see that here. So like Jordan said, in Wayne County, they're screening in cases about bed bugs and those kinds of things. In Summit County, unless we can show how it directly affects the adult, bed bugs, it's been explained to us by the health department, bed bugs are not something that can give someone disease, and there's other things that go into it. But I'm sure sometimes with those cases, is there hoarding, or there other things that they're doing that they're self-neglecting that contribute to that? Them just having bed bugs, us getting a call saying they just have bed bugs is not something we would open a case for, that being the only allegation. And then the other thing is, I saw there was a question in the chat too about police intervention. And so I just want to touch on that real quick. Adult Protective Services are based on where the senior lives at the time of the referral. Police intervention is based on where the allegation of the incident occurred or the crime occurred. So if the person is in Akron City Hospital and they live in downtown Ravenna, and the allegation occurred over in Summit County on Arlington Street, the person's in the hospital here in Summit, but they're going to be going back home to their house in Portage. So the allegations for the Adult Protective Services would need to be called into Portage County's hotline. If the allegation happened over here, the police that would be involved, the jurisdiction for that would be Akron Police Department. And so it gets a little confusing. And so it might be important to have the different counties' phone numbers available for everyone, so that in the event that you find out, it's based on wherever the person lives for Adult Protective Services. So I hope that wasn't too confusing. But we do call, if in Summit County, if we know from the phone call that it's an exploitation case, we have 2 sheriff's detectives that are co-located with us here at our department. And so if there's any kind of criminal element, or if we think there's some kind of safety concern, we get them involved from the beginning of the case so that they can look at things in leads. There's different police things that they have access to that they can look up that may help our investigation. And then if there need to be criminal charges, they're there from the beginning and have interviewed and know what's going on.
All right, thank you, Kathy. I'm gonna jump over to Portage. I saw Nick nodding enthusiastically at mentions of self-neglect, so I'm assuming that's something that you see often as well. Our next question in the chat was, can you give an example of what resources you would use for self-neglect, especially if the person is considered competent?
If they're considered, I mean, competent, I mean, we could be involved with somebody who's considered competent if they have some physical ailments. But no, we have, depending on what their need is for services for self-neglect, we, can try to get them hooked up with food services, try to get them involved in mental health, try to engage family and friend support if they give us permission to help ensure that their needs are being met if they're starting to decline and not able to meet those needs. Even try to help them get hooked up to get some of the adaptive equipment. We don't necessarily have the funding to do that, but we can, direct them the right resources to get that adaptive equipment. But then we also have some contracts for emergency food service, and then like 30-day food service while we're waiting for food stuff to get started for them. Also with some chore cleaning to help them get services cleaned up. We've had some increase in reports about in-home services getting ready to close out an individual because the home conditions aren't suitable for it to have staff in there. And so we can help get the home cleaned up if they're adults agreeable to, so they can continue to receive those services.
Okay, and while I have you, I'll let you grab the next question too, or anyone else who wants to jump in again. If you screen in a case, can an individual refuse your involvement?
Absolutely. We're dealing, APS is a little bit different than child welfare. We're dealing with adults that have rights, and that's part of our involvement is we're letting them know we have received a report and basically asking them permission to address those concerns, and they can refuse to cooperate and for us to conduct our investigation. Now, obviously, if we have in our interaction with them, we have some serious concerns about their ability to make that decision, then we would take the necessary steps then to either consult our prosecutor to see about filing an order, or law enforcement to see if an adult needs pink slipped. I mean, there's some resources we can take if we think they're a risk to themselves, but they can absolutely refuse our involvement.
All right, thank you. The next question I have is I put it down first. Oh, sorry, I clicked the wrong button. Oh, okay, no, wait, we're at Summit. So jumping over to Amy and Kathy, what is APS's involvement with cases related to mental incompetence?
Yeah, so with these cases, we would go out and do our normal investigations. If the client is already involved with a regular mental health provider, then we would work with them. If the client needs to be pink slipped, we would work with EMS or local law enforcement and concurrently work with the prosecutor and probate court if necessary. We want mental health to take the lead on these cases and to provide services as long as the client is cooperating. But if and when we learn that the client is not cooperating, that's when we would enlist the help from our court system. I think this is kind of what Nick is talking about. If we get to a point where we find that the client may not be competent to make these decisions, we can approach our court about an order, trying to get a geriatric assessment, or looking into what other things that we can do to kind of intercede on their behalf.
All right, thank you. And then another question in the chat. Is there a limit to the length of time that APS would follow up on a screened in case?
Yeah, we have 3 days. Once a case is screened in, if it's screened in as an emergency, it has to be responded to within 24 hours. But if it's screened in as just a normal initiation, it has to be done within 3 business days.
All right, thanks again. The next question we have, I put down for Stark, but I don't think she's been able to jump on yet. So I'll just open it up to anyone who is up for answering. What does the referral and reporting process look like for mandated reporters? And are there any differences for mandated reporters compared to regular citizens?
And I would say in Portage, the process is very similar. I mean, there's not a different report that we process for mandated reporters versus regular citizens. I have a different level of expectation for mandated reporters on the information they have at their disposal to report to us, and they're reporting in a more timely manner than regular citizens. So, I do have, like I said, have the higher standard for that. I think if it's a mandated reporter, it's somebody who's encountered these folks through a professional capacity and should have some of that basic information that we need to push the referral along.
All right, and then I'll keep you around, Nick, because you have the next question as well. What is an I-team and how can they be developed?
So an I-team was an initiative that came around, I want to say it was before I took over APS, but I want to say it's around 2016. I know Kathy can speak better to that because she formed our initial I-team here in Portage. But it's an interdisciplinary team that's, coordinates efforts to prevent, report, and treat adults, subject of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And really, it's those stakeholders and community sources that have encounter with these individuals. The I-team is formed by the burden of the I-team is to be formed by the APS or the designee in the county. And for ours, a lot of times we've brought law enforcement to the table, mental health, case managers to our contract. We've had our coroner's office, public assistance for Medicaid questions and waiver assistance, mental health, and even our probate court investigator. And really it's to better understand each other's roles that we have and limits to what power we have, because there's often a misconception of what we can and can't do amongst all of these divisions, and form a plan and best way to address these adults' needs.
Okay, thank you again. So next I have a few questions that we can round robin it again. So what types of referred services does APS provide in your counties? We can start with Wayne, if you don't mind.
So different type of service. I'll just state like what I often do. I make referrals to Direction Home. There's also Community Action Way Medina, which helps with transportation. They're now doing grocery delivery. If they need some services for, heating or something of that nature, they could provide possible assistance with repairs. We also have 180 for victim advocacy, also helping house some homelessness. We have Anna Zhao, which they have a homeless navigator, but they also do mental health services. We also have the counseling center, does some mental health services and case management, Meals on Wheels. That's the most common ones that I use in our county.
Awesome, thank you. Going over to Summit.
Sorry, I lost my mouse there. We have contracted services with several providers in the community. We have services with legal aid. They can assist our clients with evictions, tenant issues, and things like that. We have services with Vantage Aging, and they help us with shelf stable meals and chore services. We are contracted with Family and Community Services for hot meals. And the Sheriff's Department, as Kathy said earlier, we have 2 sheriffs that are detectives that are in our agency now that are assigned to us that go out on cases with us. They can go out if we think there may be charges later, or if we just have safety issues or concerns for our workers. We are contracted with Battered Women's Shelter for shelter nights, or if we have a senior that is in need of temporary housing. And we are contracted with Direction Home. We have a liaison that works with us daily. We learn about services that our senior may already have in place, and we work with them on adding additional services if they are needed.
All right, thank you. And then Portage.
Yeah, so we have a few we have contracts with Vantage Aging as well for shelf stable meals for like a 3-day emergency supply, and then a 30-day supply of freezer meals. And then Vantage is also who we use for our chore services for up to 10 hours of cleaning to help get the home in better order. And then we have 2 contracts with Family Community Services. One is our case management, which is when we need longer term involvement with an adult to help them either see them through to get hooked up with services, or sometimes even help transition them into more of an assisted living or nursing home setting. And then we also have a contract for geriatric counseling. And again, that's more of a short term, limited hours, but it's to get them start talking to a counselor and hopefully help them transition into more longer term if that's needed.
All right, thank you. So going on to the next question, we kind of already covered this a little bit with the bed bugs and everything, but do you see any trends of reports or referrals that don't quite fit into any of your services or responsibilities? And if so, what are they? We can go back to Summit for that one.
Okay, so mandated reporters are required to call us. If the senior is alert and oriented and already taking steps to remedy the situation, we'll likely not screen the case in. We don't have the ability to make things move any faster, and we can't predict the future. So we also have to protect the individual's rights while we're doing our job. So we have to take all of that into consideration when we're making a screening decision. It doesn't mean we don't want to get the referral because, again, as Kathy said, it's all a piece to a bigger puzzle, and sometimes that information may come in handy later. But it is part of the reasons that we may screen an earlier referral out.
All right, thank you. And then going back to Portage.
I would agree with a lot what Amy said. I mean, that's probably our biggest trend on how we screen things out. Another one is, I will say, individuals living in congregate care, that doesn't fall really under APS jurisdiction. If it's a facility of greater, I think we have non-related adults of a congregate care of 3 to 15 individuals, we have jurisdiction to investigate. Over that, which would be most nursing homes, and that would actually fall under Area Agency on Aging. And that's when we would make that cross referral then to the ombudsman unit there. And so we do see that trend. Sometimes it falls outside of our capacity.
All right, and then Wayne, if you have anything to add.
So we screen everything in, so not much to add, but I know there's something different that I do. Sometimes I get referrals from people within our job and family services that there's an elderly adult that's having difficulties providing the necessary documents when they apply for Medicaid. So sometimes I go out and do document collection for their Medicaid application to prevent future APS referrals.
All right, thank you. And then we have another question in the chat. As a mandated reporter, can there be HIPAA repercussions to reporting information to APS related to the referral for an individual? So any HIPAA?
We usually provide a HIPAA letter that states the ORC code, and usually that kind of covers as an umbrella to get the information that we need.
And as far as the initial report, HIPAA doesn't really apply when you have concerns for abuse and neglect. And that's what I try to, tell these mandated reporters sometimes when they're nervous about violating HIPAA, is that once you have that reasonable suspicion of abuse and neglect, you're not violating any HIPAA laws by reporting those concerns. Anything outside that scope that you're reporting, that could be potentially HIPAA violation, feel free not to disclose that, but the concerns that you have wouldn't be a violation.
I think the other thing to remember too is, as long as you're reporting in good faith, that's what we're going to look at. And, if you don't want to get into all the details of each and every medical procedure, okay, the person has dementia. Okay, they were diagnosed with dementia. They were diagnosed with this. The other thing is maybe just giving the doctors information, because once we get involved, we're going to try to get a release, or we're going to try to work with family and talk with them to try to obtain more information in addition to what you're giving us. We just need a good starting point to go from. We can't go off a referral saying that, oh, the person has some medical problems. Well, what kind of medical problems are you talking about? It's mental health, it's they have some kind of physical illness, it's cancer, it's whatever it is. We just need a good general starting point. But as long as you're reporting in good faith, it shouldn't come back on you. We also are not able to give out referent information. There's only certain people that can be given to, and most of that requires a court order. So we're not able to give out. If a client says, well, who called you? We can't tell them. And typically it requires a court order of some kind for us to be able to release that information. So you're protected. And when you call, you can choose to be anonymous, or you can choose to leave your name and your information. I strongly suggest that you leave your name and as much contact information as you can in the event that we need to call you back to follow up. The other thing is if you call and if you leave your name as anonymous, if it's later found that you knew the information and you did not report, that's where you get yourself in trouble.
All right, that is good to know. Thank you. Going on to the next question. What is the best way to get involved at APS in your counties? And then we can start with Wayne for this one. I know you have to jump off soon, Jordan. So if you want to take this one, that way you're free to go whenever you need to.
Okay, can you clarify this for me? The best way, is it for them to get in contact with us, or is that, can you just clarify the question for me?
Yeah, so getting into contact,
Okay.
if there's anything that would be the best practice to help you as the person who's then going to take the referral and everything, what would be most helpful to you to get?
Okay, that's a tough question. So it's more by educating, all the agencies. So we usually meet with some agencies and just educate them more on what our purpose is. That's really how we get, our familiarity kind of spread throughout our county. So I hope that answered that.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Summit.
So for us, the best way to get involved is to call the hotline and make a referral. The online portal is there, and if it's more convenient, that's fine. But we would ask that while you can remain anonymous, it is easier for us if you do leave a name and contact number, and even a best time to reach you. Because a lot of times there's information that is either missing or that we would love to have if we could just call you back. Like Kathy said, it is confidential to the person anyways, but for our purposes, or even if there was just a typo or a mistake with the address and we can't find the person, like there are times that, we are concerned and we really do need to check on this individual, but we can't find them. And being able to call the reporter back would make a difference for us. So that is very helpful and can really help in our screening decisions. Our staff is here 7:30 to 4 Monday through Friday, and our hotline is answered in-house Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. So if you call during those times, you will actually get our staff. So those are the times that you'll probably have the easiest conversation because you'll be actually speaking to one of our APS investigators. So they'll have great questions. You know, we'll make sure we get good information at that point.
Okay, thank you. And then Portage?
Yeah, I agree. The best way to get involved is, to call the hotline when you have concerns. Again, the portal's a great resource. I'm glad we have it now, but oftentimes it does lack some of that information that we would, our screeners are trained to ask for to, help make a better determination whether we're gonna screen in a report or not. And if we're missing some of that contact information, it's hard for us to follow up to get that. And we'll even, as Jordan was saying, try to educate the community. We'll even do that at the hotline level too, to let them know, what we're looking for, what our role is. And because there's some perceptions on what we can do, I think, in the community for some of these at-risk adults. And a lot of times it's, people think we have way more authority and power than we actually do. So we try to even, let them know at that level what the next steps might look like.
All right, thank you again. So kind of similar to that, if you could pick out one thing that would be the most helpful thing that a reporter could provide, whether that be information, even just their characteristics when they're calling, what would that look like? And then Jordan, I'm going back to you since you're still here.
So date of birth, definitely the severity or danger of the situation. If there's piggybacking off that, if there's like a lack of food or support, that kind of is very important to know, because if there's a lack of food, we're going to try to get out there as quick as possible. And if there's infestations, a violent person in the home, animals that could hurt, I mean, those are kind of basic questions. Doctors' names, family members, any services that are set in place at the home if they know that. But basic information would just be date of birth, address, things like that. That's are initially essential for us, because regardless of the allegation, if they say it's that they are unable to leave the house, lack of transportation, we'd still go out and offer resources. So.
All right, thank you. And then Summit.
I'm so sorry. I don't know why I don't keep my mouse in the same spot. Like I just keep losing it on my screen. Okay, so their name, their phone number, their email address, or a best time to call, so we have access to ask any additional questions we may have. The client's address, including an apartment number. The more demographic information we receive, the better off we are. Any additional information that they can give us about the work that has already been done is helpful. Any information on any alleged perpetrators, whether they're in the home, whether they have access to the clients, all of that stuff is helpful to us when we go out and make our initial visits.
Sorry about that. All right, going over to Portage.
I would agree with everything that Jordan and Amy both have said, and just to build off of that, sometimes it's important, especially for folks that live alone, for us to know if there's any family involved, or a neighbor involved, or family support. So if we have a hard time getting in contact with these individuals, we might have somebody, another source to try to make contact with the adult. And also the best way to contact the adult. Sometimes they're hard of hearing, or have a hard time with mobility and not going to answer the door in the time that we're standing at the door knocking. So even if you knock, give them 10 minutes, they'll come to the door. Even something simple as that would be good information to know. So we know how to best contact them.
All right, thank you. So, sorry. I didn't put this in the slide deck, but I do have one more question. And then if our audience members, this is my last question prepared. If you have anything to add on, feel free to drop that in the chat or start thinking about them now. So after this one, we'll open it up to you guys. But my question is, what is the one thing you'd like potential reporters and or the community to know about APS in your county? We can go back to Summit.
So we said we would just to have an understanding that APS is limited in many ways. Adults do have the rights to make their own decisions, good or bad, as long as they have the cognitive ability. So we may not always agree with them, but we have to follow them. And as long as they don't have a court order telling them to do something else, we have to go along with it. So there is a distinction between children's services and adult protective services for that reason. We can't just step in and make them do what we want them to do. So we are bound by a lot of constraints. So just that understanding that there are not always magic solutions, that sometimes we are doing the best that we can with the resources that we have at our disposal. And again, the more information that we have, the more helpful the community members and the family members are with us, the better off the results will probably be.
Thank you. And then Portage.
Yeah, I again agree with everything Amy's saying. For us, it's very similar. You know, like I said, I've done child welfare and adult protective, and adult protective comes with its own unique set of challenges. You know, children don't necessarily have, you know, specific rights that they can exercise, and they need somebody to step in and you know, be an advocate for them. Adults, on the other hand, you know, they're American citizens and have constitutional rights, and with that comes with their decisions they want to make. And unless we have something saying that they're no longer able to make those decisions, they're able to make them, good or bad. And so I think a lot of times, you know, people in the community get frustrated with adult protective services, thinking we're not doing anything. Well, we're, you know, because we can't force the individual to go into an assisted living or go into a nursing facility, because that individual feels that's the best action for that adult to take. A lot of times it's us, you know, putting in you know, folks want to, you know, live in their own home as long as they possibly can, and because it's their, you know, last bastion of control that they have sometimes in their life, and we try to honor that if it's possible, and help them. And that's when we guide them and to try to get them into services that can help facilitate that, engage them with family, engage them with families, with friends and neighbors that can help limit the risk to them so they can stay in their home as long as possible.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so that was all the questions I had prepared. I just wanted to open it up. We had some really great questions in the chat before, so if anyone has anything that they would like to ask, feel free to drop that in, or you can unmute yourself. We do have one question now. After we call the hotline, is there the ability for us to get the follow-up information? And anyone can go ahead and answer that. I think we just have Portage and Summit on the line right now.
Based on our rule, we are allowed to tell the referent whether the case was screened in or screened out. Without a release, we're not allowed to release any additional information. Now, we may call and try to ask some additional questions, and so any additional information is appreciated, but that's the only information we're allowed to share. And then I did want to go back because there was one, I just want to make sure that Joseph's question was answered. He was asking about the limit of the length of time a case that we have to follow up. So like Amy mentioned earlier, once a case is screened in, if it's an emergency, we have 24 hours to respond. Non-emergent cases are 3 working days. We have up to 30 days to conduct our investigation. At the end of that 30 days, we have to make a decision. The decision is, does this person need ongoing case management services? Are there other things they need to do? Do we need to do court intervention? And at that time, if we have gone out and done our investigation and we can either validate or non-validate whatever the allegation was, we can either close the case at the 30 days, or if we need ongoing services or our investigation is not complete because we still need to talk with the alleged perpetrator, we can ask for an extension of an additional 15 days to complete that investigation. At the end of that time, we have to do a case plan. And then once we do a case plan, we have to identify services that are going to be beneficial for the person. And then we have to meet with the client at a minimum of once a month after that, and follow up and keep talking with them about the services that we have put in place for them, whether they're beneficial or not, if additional services are necessary, and then what the next steps are.
All right, thanks, Kathy. Another question here in the chat: what information would APS need if I call with additional information about a previously reported case?
I guess that depends if you were the previous reporter and you know you made a previous report. If you are the previous reporter and you made it and you tell us that, then then we can acknowledge that we may already have that information on file. But if somebody else made a report, that'd be violating confidentiality if I acknowledge that somebody else made a report. So I'm going to act like it's the first report I have, and I'm going to ask all that basic information. So that's a difference, I would say.
Kathy, did you want to jump onto that one? I saw you on mute.
Yeah, Joseph, do you mean like if you called in and the case got screened out, are you asking like what additional information you would need to call in with in order to get a case open for the person? Is that what you mean?
Oh, actually, what I was asking was to facilitate the finding the previous case that I had reported. What information would you want from me about the previous person or the case to bring it up in your system quickly and easily?
Oh, we just need a name, or and what's really important when you guys call us is the correct spelling of names, because once we enter someone in the database, it's really important that we have them in there because with the correct spelling, because we could have 75, because it's a statewide system. When you call in, we search by name, and that's how we pull up the previous cases. And we have people in here with 10 or 15, sometimes more referrals than that, because once something happens, we might have 3 or 4 different people call us about the same person. We go out, we do an investigation, we close that case. Then 6 months from now, the same 4 or 5 people are calling us back. So there could be multiple referrals on the same person. So it's really important to make sure we have the spelling correct for them so that we can go in and look them up. But you just give us their name and we can pull it right up if we have them. And I think that's the other thing too. I think sometimes people assume that we have a case or that we've had a prior case on someone and we haven't gotten a single phone call. I couldn't tell you, there's been a few times where I think our probate court has thought that we already had an open case, or and people have the perception that we haven't done anything. We can't do something that we don't know anything about. And so please don't assume that we're involved, and please don't assume that we've already been out there or that we're not doing anything. We just may not know about it. So please call.
All right, thank you, Kathy. And that your question about Joe's question brought up another good question, and that is, what does it look like if there was a report made about someone and it was screened in and everything was closed and everything, and then all of a sudden for that same individual, there's another report either about the same situation or a different situation?
Sure. What we have the option of, if it's the exact same allegation about the same incident. So let me give this example. So let's say we have a 70-year-old woman that lives with her 50-year-old son. The 50-year-old son's taking her money, and there's a domestic violence incident between them on November 1st. So on November 2nd, we get a phone call, we go out and see her. While we're in the middle of our investigation, she says he's not taking her money, there was no domestic violence, and so we close our case. So on December 1st, we get a phone call that on November 30th, there was another domestic violence incident between the two of them. So that's a new incident. If they were calling and saying that he's exploiting her, we may screen that out because we've already investigated that. But with the new incident, there was a new incident that there was an additional domestic violence incident, that would be something that we may screen back in and go back out and say, hey, look, this is the second call we got about this, and go out and do a new investigation because that's a new allegation. And so it really depends county by county. Each county is going to may screen a little bit differently. Really, the guidelines are there for us to be a little more consistent, but some counties are going to screen differently based on volume and based on their ability to respond and what the community expectations are for that county. I'm sorry, did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, we may get several calls about the same person, and it may be kind of the same allegations over and over, but sometimes there gets to be that tipping point where we may not have had enough to go to court the first time, but maybe we screen it out a second time, comes back around the third time, and we're back out there, and we may have to get the court involved and do something to make something happen.
All right, thank you. I know we're broaching the 2 o'clock here. So if you have to jump off, feel free to. I have the contact information here up on the screen. So you can grab that before you go. But if there are any other questions, feel free to drop those in the chat or unmute, or if any of our panelists have any final thoughts or comments, feel free to go ahead.
Sorry, I'll say this again. I just want to say thank you to everybody. I appreciate Courtney, you and Lori putting this together. It's a lot of work getting people together. Sometimes people's time is very limited. I appreciate everybody that jumped on today for taking the time out of your day. It's important work that we're doing here. Please know that the state, this is a very unfunded mandate. We basically get $43,000 a year. One worker alone and their benefits. I mean, you guys know what staffing and things cost. We can, I mean, the money that they provide us does not pay. And we, believe me, I cannot pay my staff enough money for the work that they go and do helping the seniors. And you guys are all out there. We're all seeing the same things. Thank you so much. And we appreciate you guys.
Yep, and thank you to our panelists today for jumping on and lending us your expertise. This was a pretty highly requested topic for us. So I know there were so many people that I was talking to, especially first responders, that were unable to make it today, that are looking forward to the recording. So we'll get that out on our YouTube and send it out to everyone through email, just so you have that to look back on. I can't believe I'm saying this, but our next meeting is February 25th, 2022. So we're looking into next year, and more information will be coming out about that closer to the date. But if there's nothing else, I wish you all a very happy holiday season, and I'll see you soon. And thank you again for either jumping on or speaking today. And thank you for your questions.